The day of your liberation is near, and we will help you to build a new Iraq. We are a peaceful people. We are a peaceful people. We are a peaceful people.
March 2003, the US Army invades Iraq to destroy the regime of Saddam Hussein and to destroy
Weapons of mass destruction.
the invasion that will put Iraq into a never-ending turmoil.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
When are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You need to apologize! Apologize!
After 9/11, George Bush announced his war against terrorism. This allowed him to allege Saddam of building weapons of mass destruction. Saddam denied these allegations.
I think America and the world also knows that Iraq no longer has the weapons. And I believe the mobilization that's been done was in fact done partly to cover the huge lie that was being waged against Iraq about chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons.
After the USA supported Iraq in the Iran-Iraq War in 1980 to 1988, Saddam tried to invade Kuwait to secure the oil. He claimed that Kuwait was historically a part of Iraq, and of course, it was also logical that he wanted access to the Persian Gulf. And in August 1990, he begins the attack. The invasion began in the early hours of August 2nd, 1990. Iraqi forces crossed the border into Kuwait under the cover of darkness. The Iraqi military, equipped with well-coordinated and heavily armored units, rapidly advanced into Kuwait city and into other key locations. The initial assault was overwhelming, with the Iraqi forces quickly overpowering the relatively small Kuwaiti military. The capital, Kuwait City, was captured within hours. The invasion force quickly secured key infrastructure, including government buildings, communication centers, and oil facilities. Iraqi forces took control of Kuwait's oil fields, which were among the largest in the world. This control allowed Iraq to leverage the region's significant oil resources. The invasion was met with swift condemnation from the international community.
The terrible crimes and tortures committed by Saddam's henchmen against the innocent people of Kuwait are an affront to mankind.
The United Nations Security Council passed resolutions demanding Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait and imposed economic sanctions. But Saddam Hussein ignored all the warnings.
Leave Kuwait or be driven out. Saddam has arrogantly rejected all warnings.
So, the USA invaded Kuwait.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
In response, the United States and its allies formed a large coalition, leading to Operation Desert Shield to protect Saudi Arabia. This was followed by Operation Desert Storm, a military campaign to expel Iraqi forces from Kuwait. And in January 1991, US forces repelled Iraqi forces and liberated Kuwait. In just 100 hours, the US Army destroyed the Iraqi forces, which was unbelievable at this time. This operation proved the world that weapons have rapidly been modernized. Stealth bombers, smart bombs, and cruise missiles led to a shock for the world on how modern the war industry became. After the US Army kicked the Iraqi army out of Kuwait, the Iraqi army burned all of the oil fields, which was fatal to the Kuwaiti economy. After this operation, the relations between USA and Iraq were bad. Saddam Hussein made appeals to the Arab world, framing the conflict as a struggle against Western imperialism and urging Arab countries to support Iraq.
Isn't there an irony there, double standards clearly there in the behavior towards the Arabs and towards Muslims? Don't you find only in this the measure, the high degree of double standard and injustice perpetrated by the West? And by the West I mean the Western administrations against the Arabs and the Muslims?
These appeals were largely ignored by the international community. For 10 years until 2001, the relations were already bad, but the event of 9/11 did not directly lead to the invasion. What led to this invasion was the announcement of the war against terrorism. After the invasion of Afghanistan, George Bush perceived the regime of Saddam Hussein as a regime of terrorists, fundamentally because Saddam oppressed many of his opponents, and of course, the main reason was the weapons of mass destruction. But why was Saddam alleged to have these weapons? Did he ever use these weapons? Iraq had a history of using chemical weapons. During the Iran-Iraq war, Saddam's regime used chemical weapons against Iranian forces and Kurdish civilians in northern Iraq. In March 1988, Saddam's regime launched a brutal campaign known as the Anfal Campaign, targeting Kurdish towns and villages. The most infamous attack occurred in the town of Halabja. On March 16th, Iraqi planes flew over the town, releasing a deadly mix of chemical weapons. These effects were catastrophic. Thousands of men, women, and children died in this pain, their lungs burning and their skin blistering. Survivors were left with lifelong scars, both physical and psychological. This attack on Halabja became a symbol of the horrors faced by the Kurdish people under Saddam's rule. The United Nations imposed sanctions on Iraq after these attacks against civilians. Iraq destroyed much of its industry regarding these weapons, but the US thought that some weapons might have been hidden. So in 2003, after long negotiations regarding weapons of mass destruction, the US thought that Saddam still had these weapons, so Bush gave Saddam an ultimatum to leave Iraq.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing.
But Saddam refused to leave Iraq, so the Operation Iraqi Freedom began, which now later is a very cynical name for this operation. The US and coalition forces launched Operation Iraqi Freedom with a series of airstrikes, followed by a ground invasion. The ground forces primarily advanced from Kuwait into southern Iraq. The coalition forces secured Basra, Iraq's second largest city, which was an important early objective in the campaign. This allowed for a secure supply line and a base for further advances northward. Key battles took place in cities like An-Nasiriyah and Najaf, where US forces encountered Iraqi resistance. Despite this, they continued to push northward. After just 4 weeks, US forces reached the outskirts of Baghdad. They had entered the city and were conducting operations to secure key locations. Baghdad effectively fell on April the 9th, 2003, when coalition forces took control of the city center. This marked the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime. After the fall of Baghdad, Saddam Hussein fled and went into hiding. US forces and coalition forces were actively searching for him. But in December 2003, Saddam Hussein was captured by US forces in Operation Red Dawn. He was found hiding in a small underground bunker, often referred to as a spider hole, near a farmhouse in At Dawr, a village near his hometown of Tikrit. During these 9 months, Saddam Hussein moved between various safe houses and relied on a network of loyalists to avoid capture. Despite intensive searches and significant efforts by the US forces to locate him, it took nearly 9 months before he was finally found and captured. These pictures were a shock to the world because a once mighty man like Saddam Hussein looked terrible after months of hiding. It was very uncommon for people to see their former president like that. After his capture, the trial began. He was alleged to commit crimes against humanity regarding the oppression towards the Kurdish people. The Kurdish victims had finally the chance to speak directly to Saddam Hussein about his campaigns against them. This was once unthinkable. Saddam, however, pleaded innocent to all the charges. His party members also tried to oppose the court and to defend Saddam. But this did not prevent the final judgment against him.
قررت المحكمة الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكاب قتل عمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولا أليف بدلالة.
After this judgment, Saddam Hussein was hanged, and Iraq entered a new dimension of turmoil. Many ethnicities wanted autonomy. This led to the country's inability to rule with one president who is going to unite the Iraqi people. Iraq today is a state which is out of control and which is some kind of an anarchy. We all know that Saddam Hussein was a dictator. He oppressed his enemies and did commit crimes against humanity. But many of his former opponents did regret their actions against him.
The Iraq war did not need to happen. It should not have happened. Iraq did nothing to us. And we killed 1 million Iraqi civilians, lost 5,000 plus American soldiers. For what? It diminished our standing in the world. It damn near bankrupted our coffers. All it did was make the war machine get bigger and stronger.
And even the one who destroyed his statue did regret his decision.
أروح يم التمثال يعني أتألم وأنقهر أقول ليش أنا يعني سقطت هذا الصنم أعيد الصنم احتمال يعني أصنعه وأعيده لو مخوفا دول يقتلون أرجع.
You see, when I talk about people like Gaddafi and Saddam, I am not justifying their actions. I am just questioning the actions of the US regarding these military operations. 1 million civilian casualties is just unbelievable, and I think that this war had a very large impact on today's world. This operation caused many broken families, many broken hearts, and did destroy a whole country. Many even don't recognize Iraq today as a state. Saddam Hussein was oppressive and oppressed people like the Kurds, but Iraqi people today testify after the brutality of the US Army that they would even consider to go back in time to change their actions. Iraq has a lot of potential to be a beautiful country, which it once was during the Middle Age. It was also known for knowledge and ideas. Today, this is just a dream, and we can just hope that one day Iraq will recover from this war.
What happened in the
you
past.
killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate.
You killed 1 million people in Iraq.